When her billionaire husband called her worthless, she didn't cry, she disappeared. And by the time he realized what he'd lost, she had become every man's dream. Hi my beautiful family. I have missed you all. Thank you so for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The ballroom sparkled under the soft glow of chandeliers, diamonds flashing like constellations around silk and champagne. Cameras clicked. Laughter swelled. It was the kind of night people pretended to be happy, and no one pretended harder than Amara Sterling. She stood at her husband's side, dressed in a silver gown that shimmered with every hesitant breath she took. Her hand rested lightly on Adrian's arm, though he hadn't so much as glanced at her all evening. His attention was devoured by investors, socialites, and the press, not by the woman who had given up everything to be here beside him. Amara had spent weeks planning the anniversary surprise, a short, heartfelt speech to honor their marriage and announce the charity foundation she'd built in his name. It was supposed to be their renewal moment, the night he might finally see her again. When the host called her name, she stepped forward, nerves trembling beneath her skin. "Good evening," she began softly, voice echoing through the marble hall. "Tonight, I just want to celebrate the man who's inspired me to." Adrian's sharp voice cut her off. "Amara, sit down." A hush fell. Guests exchanged looks. Amara froze, her smile faltering. He turned toward her, tone laced with irritation. "You don't need to embarrass yourself trying to sound important. Leave the speeches to people who actually matter." Her chest constricted. The microphone slipped in her shaking hand. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Worthless. He didn't say it outright yet, but everyone felt it. She swallowed hard, trying to hide her trembling. "I just thought." "You thought wrong," Adrian snapped. His jaw tightened, eyes cold as polished steel. "Sit down." The silence that followed was suffocating. Amara lowered the mic, her throat burning as she stepped away from the podium. Her heels echoed across the marble floor, each step heavier than the last. She sat quietly beside him, staring at her reflection in a half-filled champagne glass. Behind her mask of calm, tears threatened to spill. The word he didn't need to say was already ringing in her ears. Worthless. The rest of the night blurred into laughter, gossip, and flashes of light. No one dared comfort her, not in Adrian Sterling's world. By the time the party ended, the rain had begun to fall outside. She walked toward the car, her gown dragging through puddles. "Where are you going?" Adrian asked, distracted, still on his phone. "Home," she said flatly. He didn't even look up. "Take the driver. I have a meeting." She laughed, a small, broken sound. "Of course you do." He didn't notice her leave. He didn't even look. That was the moment Amara realized something inside her had died. The woman who had waited for love, for validation, for him, she no longer existed. By the time her car disappeared into the rain, Adrian was already surrounded by flashing lights and business partners. But Amara's silence was louder than any of it. Hours later, her phone buzzed. One message from him. Just 3 words, "Don't cause drama." She stared at it through tears, then deleted it. For the first time in years, she felt something strange. Not sadness. Not rage. Freedom. Her reflection in the dark car window looked almost like a stranger's, a woman tired of breaking quietly. She whispered, "Maybe I'll just stop being the kind of woman you can forget." And that night, beneath the glow of city lights and a storm that wouldn't stop crying, Amara Sterling, the woman once called worthless, vanished from her husband's world. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she'd never go back. If someone you loved once told you that you were nothing, would you walk away, or would you stay to prove them wrong? The city pulsed quietly beneath the rain. Streetlights blurred through her tears, and the hem of Amara's silver gown clung to her ankles like a reminder of where she had come from, a life of glittering cages. She walked aimlessly through the soaked sidewalks, arms wrapped around herself. No driver, no security, no husband. Just the echo of his voice. You don't need to embarrass yourself trying to sound important. It was past midnight when her heels snapped. The sound startled her, absurd and sharp in the quiet street. She stumbled forward, catching herself against a lamppost, breathing hard. A few pedestrians passed, pretending not to stare at the woman in a drenched evening gown. That's when she heard a man's voice behind her. "Hey, careful there." She turned slightly. A man stood under a shop awning, holding a camera slung over his shoulder. Dark jacket, wet hair, and eyes that studied her not with judgment, but with concern. "I'm fine," she said quickly, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "Doesn't look like it." He stepped closer, but not too close. "You're bleeding." Amara glanced down, a scrape on her ankle. She hadn't even felt it. "I can call a cab," she said, trying to sound composed. He nodded, watching her struggle with her phone that refused to unlock under the rain. "Battery's dead?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Apparently, like everything else in my life tonight." The man smiled faintly, as if hearing the sadness beneath her joke. "There's a diner around the corner. It's warm, and the coffee's terrible, but it's dry. Come on." She wanted to refuse. She should have refused. But something in his tone, gentle, patient, made her follow him. The diner was nearly empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed. A waitress in a pink uniform poured them both coffee without asking questions. Amara sat across from the stranger, still clutching her coat around her shoulders. He spoke first. "I'm Ethan." "Amara," she said softly. He nodded. "You from around here, Amara?" "Not anymore." He waited, but she said nothing more. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. He didn't pry. He just sipped his coffee, eyes occasionally drifting to his camera on the table. Finally, she asked, "You're a photographer?" "Mostly street portraits. People tell their stories better than buildings do." She looked out the window at the wet streets. "You think faces tell the truth?" "Always," he said quietly. "If you know how to look." Amara smiled faintly, the first real smile of the night. "Then maybe don't look too closely at mine." "I already did," he replied. "And it looks like someone forgot to tell you you're human. Not an ornament." The words hit her harder than she expected. For a second, she looked away. No one had spoken to her like that in years. He noticed her discomfort and quickly changed the subject. "So, you planning to keep walking in that dress, or should I lend you a jacket?" She laughed softly, the sound fragile. "I think the dress has served its purpose. Humiliation and frostbite all in one night." "Sounds like a story worth remembering," he said. "Or photographing." Amara tilted her head. "You'd photograph this?" He grinned. "The woman who walks away from a party looking like she's finally free? Yeah, I would." She studied him, the quiet kindness, the calm energy. He wasn't flirting. He was seeing. And for the first time in forever, Amara didn't feel invisible. When she finally left the diner an hour later, Ethan insisted on walking her to the nearest hotel. "It's not safe this late," he said simply. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the air smelled like wet asphalt and new beginnings. "Thank you," she murmured as they reached the corner. "For the coffee? For not asking what happened?" He smiled. "You didn't look like you wanted to talk. But if you ever do." He handed her a small card. A simple white one. "Ethan Hale, Photography." Amara took it, fingers brushing his. "Good night, Ethan." He nodded. "Good night, Amara. Try not to disappear completely." She turned away, walking toward the glow of the hotel sign. Behind her, the photographer stood under the streetlight, camera raised, capturing one last image. The silhouette of a woman walking into the night, her ruined gown catching the city's light like silver fire. He didn't know her story yet. But something in that photograph told him she wasn't done rewriting it. Do you believe that a single act of kindness, even from a stranger, can change someone's entire life? The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of the small hotel room. It wasn't the penthouse view Amara was used to. No ocean skyline, no marble floors, just a quiet street and the hum of city life below. But for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel cruel. Her phone lay on the nightstand, flashing dozens of missed calls from Adrian. She stared at it for a long while, then powered it off completely. Not today. Not anymore. By noon, she was at a thrift store buying jeans and a simple white blouse, clothes that didn't scream money, just comfort. She tied her hair up in a messy bun, looked at her reflection, and whispered, "Maybe this is what freedom looks like." As she left the store, a voice called out, "Careful, Amara. I might start believing you actually like this side of town." She turned, surprised to see Ethan standing by a street vendor, camera slung across his neck and that same half-smile playing on his lips. "You following me?" she teased. He shrugged. "You left a story unfinished last night." She rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. "Photographers. Always chasing endings. Or new beginnings," he replied. They walked together through the market, Ethan snapping candid photos of vendors, children laughing, a couple dancing by a fruit stand. Amara watched how he saw the world, not through luxury or status, but moments. Real, messy, beautiful moments. At one point, he turned his lens toward her. "Don't," she said quickly. "Why not?" "Because I don't even know who I am right now." He lowered the camera slightly. "That's exactly the version worth remembering." For a second, she froze. The words slipped under her defenses like sunlight through cracks. He took the shot before she could protest, her eyes half-shadowed, her hair loose, her smile unsure but alive. "Perfect," he murmured. She shook her head, flustered. "You're impossible." "Maybe. But you're real, finally." Meanwhile, across the city, Adrian paced his office, jaw tight. "She's not answering," he demanded. "No, sir," his assistant replied. "Not since last night's event." He rubbed his temples. He'd been drunk, yes, but he didn't mean for her to actually leave. She always came back, quiet and apologetic, pretending his cruelty didn't cut as deep as it did. But this silence was different. And the world was noticing. A few gossip blogs had picked up on her dramatic exit. Billionaire's wife storms out in tears. His PR team was panicking. His investors were asking questions. He hated it, not the scandal, but the sudden emptiness of their mansion. Her perfume no longer lingered on the marble stairs. Her laughter no longer filled the quiet corners. Adrian poured himself another drink, muttering under his breath, "She'll come back. She always does." But for the first time, a small voice in his chest whispered something new. What if she doesn't? Back in the market, Amara and Ethan stopped for coffee at a small cafe. "You ever think about going back?" he asked quietly. She stirred her drink, thoughtful. "Back to what?" "To being invisible." "You weren't invisible," he said. "You were just standing in someone else's shadow." Amara looked up, meeting his gaze. "And what if I don't know how to stand on my own yet?" Ethan smiled softly. "Then start by standing beside someone who sees you." The moment hung in the air, fragile, electric. Amara felt something shift inside her chest, a warmth she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She took a deep breath. "I don't want to be saved, Ethan." He nodded. "Good. I don't save people. I remind them they already know how to swim." Amara smiled faintly. "You're strange. And you're healing," he said. That evening, Amara stood in front of the hotel mirror, looking at her reflection again, hair messy, skin glowing from the sun, a trace of laughter still on her lips. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who'd run through the rain. For the first time in forever, she didn't see worthless. She saw becoming. When someone breaks you, do you hide from the world, or do you let the world see you rebuild? The following week unfolded like a storm Amara didn't see coming. What began as a simple coffee turned into long conversations, and those conversations led to a quiet partnership neither of them planned. Ethan was preparing a small photography exhibition for a local charity, portraits of ordinary women with extraordinary resilience. When he showed her the collection, Amara's breath caught. Each photo was raw and breathtaking, a mother holding her child in a flood, a street vendor smiling through wrinkles of exhaustion, a girl with prosthetic legs dancing on a rooftop. "These are beautiful," she whispered. "They're real," Ethan said. "I want people to see beauty in truth, not in perfection." He paused, watching her face carefully. "Actually, I was hoping you'd help me curate it. You have an eye for detail. I saw it at the gala before things went south." Amara hesitated. "Ethan, I'm not that woman anymore. I don't know if I can face crowds or people." He smiled gently. "Then we start small. Just you, me and the art. Let it be therapy." For days, they worked side by side in his small studio, adjusting lights, selecting frames, rearranging photos. The air was filled with quiet laughter, stray coffee cups, and fragments of music from Ethan's old radio. Amara began to rediscover herself in those moments, the part of her that loved design, expression, beauty that wasn't material. Sometimes, when Ethan looked at her over the soft glow of lamplight, she'd catch something in his eyes, something tender, hesitant, and dangerously honest. He never crossed lines. He didn't need to. His silence spoke volumes. And though she told herself she wasn't ready, her heart had already begun to lean. Meanwhile, Adrian was unraveling. He'd fired 2 PR executives, cancelled 3 meetings, and still couldn't shake the gnawing emptiness inside his chest. When he looked at the papers on his desk, he saw her name everywhere, the headlines still running wild with speculation. "Billionaire wife goes missing after public humiliation." Amara wins hearts as photos of her simpler life surface. Wait. He paused at that one. Photos. He clicked the article. And there she was, smiling at a market stand, sunlight brushing her skin, eyes bright and alive. Ethan's photo. His grip on the mouse tightened until his knuckles whitened. "She's with him," he muttered. "That photographer." For the first time, Adrian felt the sting of jealousy, a feeling he'd never allowed himself before. But beneath it, something uglier stirred. Fear. Because he realized, she didn't need him anymore. The day of the exhibition came fast. Ethan stood beside Amara as the gallery lights dimmed and the first guests trickled in. She wore a simple emerald dress, elegant, minimal, and for the first time in years, she didn't dress to impress anyone. She dressed to feel herself. "Are you nervous?" Ethan asked quietly. "A little." He smiled. "Good. It means you care." She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I haven't felt this alive in a long time." Ethan's expression softened. "Then don't lose it this time. No matter who tries to take it away." The night was perfect. People admired the art, donors praised Ethan's vision, and several women approached Amara, thanking her for the layout, the storytelling, the light she brought into the room. She was glowing, not from luxury, but from pride. Her own kind of beauty. And then, the air shifted. Across the room, a tall figure entered. Tailored suit. Sharp jaw. Eyes like cold steel. Adrian. The noise around her dimmed into a hum. Her throat tightened. Ethan followed her gaze, his posture tensing. "That's him, isn't it?" Amara nodded slowly. "Yes." Adrian's eyes found hers across the gallery, 100 emotions flashing at once, regret, anger, longing. He started walking toward her. Ethan moved slightly closer, protective but calm. "Do you want to talk to him?" he asked softly. Amara's lips trembled. "No. But I think I need to." When Adrian stopped before her, the silence was deafening. "You look different," he said finally. "Happier." "I am," she replied, voice steady. He laughed bitterly. So this is what you ran away to? Art shows and charity gigs with him. Ethan straightened, but Amara raised a hand. She didn't need defending anymore. You called me worthless, she said quietly. And that night, I decided to find out what I was truly worth. Turns out, it wasn't you. The words hit him harder than any slap could have. He swallowed, trying to regain control. You'll come back, he muttered. You always do. Amara smiled faintly. Not this time. And with that, she turned away, back to the art, back to the life she was creating. Adrian stood frozen, watching her walk toward Ethan, laughter returning, light returning, and for the first time, he understood what true loss felt like. That night, as the exhibition ended and the city lights blurred outside, Ethan handed Amara one of her own portraits, the candid one from the market. Keep it, he said, to remind you how far you've come. She looked at it, tears glistening. You really think I'm that woman now? Ethan smiled softly. No. You're even more. Have you ever had to look your pain in the eye, and walk past it without breaking? The morning after the exhibition was quiet. Too quiet. Amara sat by the window of Ethan's studio, her fingers tracing the edge of a coffee mug as dawn painted the city in pale gold. The event had been a success. They'd raised enough funds for the women's shelter, and people had praised her eye for storytelling. But her heart wasn't celebrating. It was unsettled. Adrian's sudden appearance the night before had reopened something. Not love, not longing, but a wound she thought she'd sealed. Ethan entered, still sleepy, a hoodie half-zipped. Couldn't rest. Amara shook her head. I just keep thinking about what he said. About coming back. She nodded. It's not that I ever would. It's just the nerve of it. He still thinks I'm the same woman who begged him to see me. Ethan sat beside her, his voice low. That's what people like him do. They build palaces out of power and expect you to stay trapped in the reflection they made of you. She glanced at him, smiling faintly. You talk like you've been trapped before. His jaw tightened. For a brief second, something flickered in his eyes. Pain, sharp and fleeting. I was, he said quietly. Once. The silence between them deepened. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken truth. Finally, Amara asked, what happened? Ethan stared at the floor for a long moment. Her name was Lila. We were together for 5 years. She died in a car accident I caused. Amara's breath caught. You. He nodded slowly. I was driving. It was raining, and I was too focused on getting the perfect night shot for a magazine. 1 second. 1 stupid second. And she was gone. Amara's hand trembled as she reached out, then stopped midway, unsure. Ethan. He let out a shaky laugh. I haven't touched a camera for almost 2 years after that. Couldn't even look at one. But when I met you, I don't know, something shifted. You looked like someone trying to survive their own wreckage. Her eyes burned with tears. Maybe we both were. For the first time, Ethan allowed her to hold his hand. No words, just the quiet comfort of shared pain. That afternoon, a letter arrived at the studio addressed to Amara Blake. The name startled her. It was her maiden name. Inside was a short, typewritten note. You think you can hide behind charity work and small crowds, but the city remembers who you are, and so do I. Her stomach dropped. Adrian. Ethan saw her expression and took the letter gently. He's trying to scare you, he said. You don't have to let him. Amara's lips trembled. You don't understand. Adrian doesn't give up what he thinks belongs to him. If he feels humiliated, he'll make me pay. Then we fight back, Ethan said, firm. On your terms this time. That evening, Ethan showed her an idea. He wanted to feature her story anonymously in the second phase of his exhibition, a photo series about rebirth. He held up the camera. One portrait. Not of pain. Of power. Let's show the world that the woman who was called worthless learned how to rise. Amara hesitated. You really think I can do that? I don't think, he said softly. I know. The photo shoot was quiet, almost sacred. Amara stood against a brick wall, hair down, no makeup. Ethan didn't give her directions. He just let her be. Click. Her eyes, steady. Click. Her lips, not smiling, but unafraid. Click. And in that moment, the woman who had once cowered before a billionaire became someone entirely new, the embodiment of survival. Ethan lowered the camera, eyes shining. There. That's the one. She walked up to him slowly, voice breaking. You see me better than I see myself. He smiled faintly. No, Amara. You just stopped hiding from the mirror. But as they reviewed the photos that night, the front door of the studio burst open. Adrian stood there, his expression cold and dark. So it's true, he said, voice dripping with venom. You're letting him use you now? Ethan stepped forward immediately. You need to leave. Adrian ignored him, his gaze fixed on Amara. You think this little reinvention makes you better than me? You're nothing without my name. Amara's voice shook, but she stood tall. Then it's a good thing I left it behind. He smirked. We'll see how long that lasts when the world sees who you really are. He turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frames rattled. Amara collapsed into a chair, trembling. Ethan knelt before her, hands on her shoulders. Hey, look at me. He's losing control because you're free. That's all this is. She nodded weakly, tears spilling. He's not going to stop, Ethan. Ethan's voice softened. Then neither will we. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the city lights. Her mind was a storm, fear, love, guilt, power, all colliding. But beneath it all, a spark glowed steady. She wasn't the same woman who ran out of that mansion. And tomorrow, she would prove it. If someone once defined your worth for you, how do you reclaim it? Do you fight them, or do you outgrow them? The next morning, the city woke under soft sunlight, streaking across the rooftops and filtering through the blinds of Ethan's studio. Amara sat at the edge of the couch, watching the light move across her hands. It was strange, how much one night could change. A part of her still trembled from Adrian's outburst, but another part stood taller. For the first time, fear didn't own her. Ethan walked in quietly, holding 2 mugs. You didn't sleep, he said gently. I didn't want to, she replied. I kept thinking, he's not going to take this from me. Not again. He handed her the coffee, smiling faintly. Then we make today count. By afternoon, they were back at the gallery, reviewing photos for the Rebirth campaign. Each image told a story, women scarred but standing, faces lit with strength. And right there among them, was hers. Her portrait. The one he took the night before. Her reflection met her gaze on the screen. No makeup, no armor, just truth. Ethan leaned closer, voice soft. You see it now, don't you? She turned to him slowly. See what? That you were never broken. Just hidden. Their eyes held. Too long, too deep. The air shifted, quiet and magnetic. Amara tried to look away, but his voice stopped her. You don't have to be afraid of being seen anymore. She whispered. And if I am? He smiled gently. Then I'll stand beside you until you're not. Something in her chest gave way. She hadn't realized how much she'd been starving for safety, not the kind money bought, but the kind presence gave. And right there, she let herself breathe. That evening, they decided to take a walk through the city, a celebration, Ethan said. The streets buzzed with laughter, food stalls, and music. Amara found herself laughing too, freely, almost childishly, when a kid spilled popcorn near her shoes and apologized profusely. Ethan grinned. You know, this version of you? She's unstoppable. She raised an eyebrow. Unstoppable? I just survived popcorn trauma. He chuckled. No, I mean this lightness. The Amara I met was heavy. Beautiful, but buried. This you, she's sunlight. Amara looked away, smiling shyly. I haven't been called that before. He stopped walking. Then let me be the first. Their laughter faded into silence, the kind that hummed with possibility. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, a small, reverent gesture. Neither moved. The world narrowed to the space between them. And then, slowly, he leaned in. The kiss was soft, hesitant, like two people learning how to believe again. When they pulled away, Amara whispered, "You're not supposed to fix me, Ethan." He smiled faintly. Who said anything about fixing? Maybe I'm just falling for you as you are. Her breath caught, her heart racing in a way it hadn't in years. Not with fear, but with aliveness. Meanwhile, across town, Adrian sat in his office, staring at a framed photo, their wedding day. Her eyes had been full of hope. His, full of control. He realized bitterly that somewhere along the way, he'd fallen in love with ownership, not her. But the silence of the empty penthouse was unbearable. Every corner whispered her laughter. Every echo reminded him she was gone. For the first time, regret didn't just sting. It ached. He poured another drink, but couldn't bring himself to swallow. She's really gone, he murmured. And she's never coming back. Back in the studio, Ethan and Amara sat watching the city lights through the window. She spoke softly, almost to herself. It's strange. I spent years thinking love had to look like sacrifice. Like bending until you broke. Ethan turned toward her. And now? Now I think maybe love is something that helps you stand taller. He smiled. Exactly. They sat in silence for a while, the quiet stretching comfortably between them. Amara leaned her head on his shoulder. I don't know where this is going, Ethan. He rested his cheek against her hair. Then let's not ruin it by trying to name it. Let's just build it. Over the next few weeks, they did just that. Days were filled with art, laughter, and the steady rhythm of rebuilding. Amara volunteered at the women's shelter she'd helped fund, mentoring others starting over. Her story began to circulate quietly, anonymously, inspiring others who'd been told they were less than. And Ethan, for the first time in years, began submitting his photos again. His work was picked up by an international magazine, and when they asked about his muse, he smiled and said, "She reminded me what it means to feel again." One evening, they sat together on the studio floor surrounded by photos. Ethan picked up one and said, "Do you ever think about what your life could have been if you hadn't left him?" Amara nodded slowly. "Every day. But then I remember, I didn't lose anything that mattered. I found myself instead." He smiled. "And that's the real wealth." She leaned closer, whispering, "You really believe that?" He nodded. "I stopped believing in money, fame, or control a long time ago. But I believe in love that heals." Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then, softly, "So do I. Have you ever met someone who didn't rescue you, but simply reminded you of who you are? Would you let them in, or stay behind your walls?" 4 weeks, Amara's life had been a balance of calm and new beginnings. Until the morning it all came crashing down. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications flooded her screen. Headline: Ex-wife of tech billionaire Adrian Cole spotted with photographer Ethan Shaw, inside her revenge romance. A cascade of invasive photos followed, Amara and Ethan at the art gallery, laughing in the park, his hand brushing her hair. The tone was cruel, twisting everything sacred into spectacle. Her stomach dropped. Someone had leaked their private moments. And worse, one of the photos had been taken from inside Ethan's studio. She drove straight there. Ethan was already pacing, phone in hand, furious. "Amara, I swear I didn't." "I know," she cut in, voice trembling. "But how did they get inside, Ethan? These shots, they're from your window." He hesitated, guilt flickering in his eyes. I didn't close it last night. I didn't think anyone." Her chest tightened. You didn't think. Ethan, this could ruin everything. Adrian will use this. Before he could answer, her phone rang again, unknown number. She didn't want to answer, but instinct told her it was him. She pressed accept. Adrian. His voice was cool, calm, too calm. Quite a show you're putting on, Amara. The charity angel with a scandal on her hands. Her throat tightened. You did this, didn't you? He chuckled. Oh no. The world did. I just gave them a nudge. What do you want? I want what's mine. My company's stock plummeted after your little speech at the foundation gala. Investors are nervous. But you could fix it. Come back to me, issue a statement, pretend this fling never happened. I'll make sure the photos disappear. She felt her blood run cold. You're blackmailing me? Call it leverage, sweetheart. Amara hung up, shaking. Ethan watched her carefully. What did he say? He wants me back. He's threatening to destroy the charity if I don't. Ethan stepped closer, furious. Then let him. We'll fight it. But she pulled away. You don't understand. I built that foundation with everything I had left. If it collapses, all those women. He interrupted. Amara, you can't let him control you again. Tears welled in her eyes. It's not about me anymore. The room went silent. For the first time, Ethan saw fear, real, deep fear, in her again. She whispered, maybe I should just do what he wants. He grabbed her hand. Don't. You walk back into that world, and you'll lose everything you've become. But she pulled away, voice breaking. Maybe that's the price for peace. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by silence. Every headline screamed betrayal. Every comment twisted her name. But what hurt most wasn't the public shame, it was the look on Ethan's face when she left his studio. She opened her laptop to write the statement Adrian demanded, and froze. Across her desk sat one of Ethan's photos, the one of her looking out the window, raw and fearless. Underneath, he had scrawled, "You don't belong to the people who broke you." Her hand trembled. She closed the laptop. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in the dark of his studio, replaying everything. He knew Adrian wouldn't stop. He also knew Amara wouldn't fight him head-on, not if it meant others could get hurt. He picked up his camera and opened a folder titled, Proof. Inside were months of photos he'd taken, evidence of Adrian's corporate scandals that had quietly surfaced during Amara's rebuilding. He'd been waiting for the right moment to expose it. Maybe now was that moment. The next morning, Ethan called her. She didn't answer. So he went live. His voice shook slightly at first, but steadied as the truth poured out. He revealed everything, the leaked photos, the manipulation, the blackmail. He exposed documents Adrian thought were buried, offshore accounts, forged deals, and emotional abuse testimonies from former employees. The video went viral within hours. The world's sympathy shifted, from the billionaire to the woman he called worthless. Amara saw it unfold on her screen, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to be angry. Ethan had acted without asking. But as she watched him speak, she realized something deeper. He hadn't done it for himself. He'd done it for her. And for every woman who'd been silenced by men like Adrian. Tears blurred her vision. Later that day, there was a knock on her door. When she opened it, Ethan stood there, exhausted but calm. She stared at him for a long time before whispering, "You shouldn't have done that." "I know," he said softly. "But I couldn't watch him erase you again." She exhaled shakily. "Now he'll come for you." He smiled faintly. "Let him. I'm not afraid of men who hide behind money." Her voice broke. "I was." He reached for her hand. "Not anymore." She collapsed against him, sobbing quietly, not from pain this time, but from release. The walls she'd spent years building finally cracked. Across town, Adrian's empire began to crumble. Investigations reopened, investors pulled out, and his public apology came too late. In his penthouse, the same one where he once laughed at her, he stood alone, surrounded by silence and regret. His empire hadn't been destroyed by greed. It had been destroyed by the woman he underestimated. Sometimes, love doesn't protect you from pain, it gives you the strength to face it. Would you risk peace to tell the truth? The city was buzzing. News outlets everywhere screamed the same headline. Billionaire Adrian Cole under investigation after explosive allegations by photographer Ethan Shaw. Every network, every platform, the world was watching. And so was Amara. For hours she sat in her apartment, staring at the screen, her heart a storm of emotions. Vindication, fear, and something deeper, a quiet sense of freedom. The man who had called her worthless was finally being forced to face the truth. Still, a part of her trembled. Not for herself, but for what came next. She had been silent too long. And silence, she realized, was the last thing she owed anyone. That evening, she called a press conference. The hall filled quickly, reporters, cameras, flashing lights. She hadn't been seen publicly since the scandal broke. When she walked onto the stage, the room fell silent. Gone was the timid ex-wife of a billionaire. She stood tall, radiant in a simple white suit, clean, bold, unapologetic. Every step echoed confidence. When she reached the podium, she took a deep breath and spoke. For years, I was told my worth depended on who I stood beside. That without a man's name, I was nothing. I believed that lie once. But the truth is, worth isn't something given. It's something claimed. Flashes erupted, but she didn't flinch. I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to tell the truth, mine. And to every woman who's ever been told she's replaceable, small, or silent, you don't need permission to rise. You already have everything you need. Her voice steadied, the tremor gone. This isn't revenge. This is reclamation. Applause began, hesitant at first, then thunderous. Tears streamed down faces in the audience. Amara smiled, not in triumph, but in peace. Later that night, as she stepped out of the hall, she found Ethan waiting near the steps, camera in hand. "You didn't tell me you were going to do that," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "Would you have stopped me?" "Never," he said. "I just wish I could have been there beside you." "You were," she said, nodding toward his camera. "You always are." He lifted it slightly. "One last photo." She laughed quietly. "One last." Click. The flash caught her mid-smile, her hair dancing in the wind, a picture not of glamour, but of grace. He looked at the shot on his screen and whispered, "That's the one." Meanwhile, the fallout spread like wildfire. Adrian's empire was crumbling, board members resigning, companies distancing themselves, old secrets surfacing. But he refused to disappear quietly. In a desperate move, he appeared on a live talk show, claiming to have loved Amara deeply, and blaming media manipulation. The performance was polished, but hollow. Viewers saw through it instantly. The internet turned against him. #AmaraSpeaks trended for 3 days straight. Her words, "Worth isn't given, it's claimed," became a rallying cry. Women began sharing their own stories online. Survivors, dreamers, professionals, mothers, all tagging her foundation. The movement was unstoppable. Weeks passed. The investigation into Adrian's corruption went federal. His assets were frozen, and he stepped down as CEO. One evening, as Amara reviewed expansion plans for the foundation, her assistant burst in, holding an envelope. "It's from Adrian," she said hesitantly. Amara opened it slowly. Inside was a short note in his handwriting. "You were right. You were always the power I pretended to have. I hope someday you forgive yourself for ever loving me." She stared at the words for a long moment, then folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't something she owed him. It was something she could finally give herself. Later that night, Ethan arrived at her apartment. She was on the balcony, watching the city lights below. He walked over quietly. "You did it." She turned, smiling softly. "No. We did it." He hesitated. "So what now?" She exhaled, gazing at the skyline. "Now, I live." He smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You already are." Silence fell between them, comfortable, charged, beautiful. Then she whispered, "You know what's funny?" "What?" "All those years I tried to fit into his world, the dinners, the gowns, the fake smiles. And the first time I ever felt like I belonged was standing barefoot in your studio." Ethan chuckled softly. "Maybe belonging has nothing to do with where you stand, and everything to do with who you stand with." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes soft. "Then I'm exactly where I should be." The next morning, the world woke to another headline, but this time, it wasn't about scandal or downfall. Headline: Amara Cole launches Rise Beyond initiative, empowering women worldwide to rebuild their lives. The article showed her standing beside Ethan, surrounded by smiling women and children. The photo radiated light. Underneath, a quote from Amara: "We are not defined by what broke us, but by what we choose to build next." When the world finally gives you the microphone, do you use it for revenge or redemption? The sun broke over the horizon like a promise. For the first time in years, Amara wasn't waking up to someone else's expectations. She was waking up to her own purpose. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of Ethan's laughter echoing faintly from the kitchen. He was trying, and failing, to make pancakes. She watched from the doorway, smiling as he flipped one too high and caught it with exaggerated pride. "Please tell me you got that on camera," she teased. He looked over his shoulder, flour on his cheek. "I don't record breakfast disasters. I live them." She laughed, her heart light. "You're impossible. And you're glowing," he said softly. She rolled her eyes. "It's just sunlight." "No," he said, stepping closer. "It's peace." The words hung in the air, gentle, true. A year had passed since the scandal. The Rise Beyond Foundation had expanded into 5 countries. Survivors and dreamers filled its halls. Women found jobs, education, shelter, hope. And Amara? She'd become a global voice for resilience and empowerment. But she still made time for the small things: morning coffee, late-night sketching, walking barefoot after the rain. The woman who once believed she was worthless now walked through the world like someone who knew exactly who she was. That afternoon, she stood before a mirror in the Foundation's new headquarters, a towering glass building with sunlight spilling into the atrium. It had been 1 year to the day since she walked away from Adrian. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same date, the same city, but a completely different woman. Her assistant entered quietly. "The guests are arriving. Are you ready?" Amara took a deep breath, her reflection steady. "I've been ready for a long time." When she stepped onto the stage, applause thundered through the hall. But this time, it wasn't because she was Adrian Cole's wife. It was because she was Amara. She smiled at the crowd, survivors, leaders, supporters, and began. "A year ago, I thought my life had ended. But what I didn't know was that endings are just disguised beginnings. Every time someone told me I wasn't enough, I believed it, until I realized the only voice that truly defines us is our own." She paused, her gaze scanning the audience, and for a moment, she spotted Ethan, camera in hand, smiling. "If you take anything from my story," she continued, "let it be this: you don't need to prove your worth to anyone. You just need to remember it." Applause again, but softer this time, more emotional. Later, as the event ended and the hall emptied, Ethan approached the stage. "You were brilliant," he said. She grinned. "You always say that." He shrugged. "You always are." He handed her a small envelope. "Before I left the studio this morning, I found this. Thought you should have it." She opened it slowly. Inside was a single photograph. It was the shot he took of her that day in the market. Messy bun, thrift store blouse, unsure smile. She traced the edges with her thumb. I remember this. It was the first time you saw yourself, he said softly. Amara looked up, eyes glistening. And the first time someone saw me. He smiled. Still do. For a moment, silence settled between them, comfortable, warm. Then Ethan reached for her hand. So, where to next? She tilted her head, amused. Are you asking me to run away again? He chuckled. No. I'm asking where you want to go. Not to escape, but to begin. She looked at him, the man who had shown her that love doesn't rescue you. It reminds you of your wings. Anywhere, she whispered. As long as it's forward. He leaned in, forehead resting against hers. Then forward it is. Days later, a new photo began circulating online, a magazine cover. It showed Amara standing at the balcony of the Foundation's headquarters, wind in her hair, sunlight framing her face. The headline read, From Broken to Boundless, How Amara Cole Redefined Power, Grace, and Love. Beneath it, a quote. He called me worthless. But that night, I stopped waiting to be chosen, and chose myself. A month later, Amara and Ethan walked along the beach at sunset, barefoot and laughing. He carried his camera, but for once, he didn't lift it. You're not taking pictures? She asked. He smiled. Some moments aren't meant to be captured. They're meant to be lived. She slipped her hand into his. Then let's live this one. They walked in silence as waves brushed against their feet. The horizon glowed gold, endless, alive. Amara paused, closing her eyes. The wind carried echoes of her past, the tears, the betrayal, the rediscovery. She opened them again to the sight of Ethan beside her, steady and real. For the first time, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt like home. As they turned to leave, she whispered, half to herself, half to the sea. He called me worthless. But that night, I became everything I was meant to be. When someone tells you you're not enough, what would it take for you to finally believe that you already are? Tell us in the comments. Your words might be what someone else needs to heal.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.